Hey everyone, welcome Azure Cosmos DB Live TV. I'm Mark Brown and I'm with Matt Soucoup today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Mark. Actually, let me rephrase that. I'm freezing. It is so cold here in Seattle. Last week we had a ton of smoke. I couldn't go outside, and now it's freezing. I can't go
Really?
outside.
Oh, it's nicer down here as well. After almost 3 weeks of like 100-degree temps, and then we had something resembling a hurricane or the remnants of it kind of blow
That's right.
through, and that gave us a little bit of rain, which was nice. We could use more always. So feel free to send some our way if you could.
We'll be glad to.
The whole state of California would greatly appreciate it. So, hey, folks, we're going to talk about .NET MAUI today. This is something, I've been watching what you guys have been doing for some time now, and I'm just fascinated. It's amazing how well, or just how much all this is just evolving. And it's, what's not to love, I guess. And I'm glad to have you here with us and show us basically how to use .NET MAUI with Cosmos DB. So I don't want to hold you up, so I'll let you kind of get going there.
Sure.
But yeah, let's learn what you got here.
All right. Sounds great. So switch over to the slides here, and I quickly introduce myself again. My name is Matt Soucoup, and I lead up .NET Cloud Advocacy here at Microsoft. So which means I get to do, just like you, Mark, a lot of community engagements and talking to everybody and teaching them what .NET MAUI is. And so what .NET MAUI stands for, MAUI is the Multi-App User Interface. So it's great.
I never realized. I thought it was just a code name that just got shipped into production.
I know, right? I mean,
sometimes do that, right?
Yeah. We have like cool code names for them, and it's so good, you just kind of keep it. But yeah, it actually has a meaning behind it. Yeah, multi-application user interface. So yeah, just worked out that way, and you can get all the cool branding around it too, where you can have,
that's even more incredible that you got marketing to buy off on that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a rarity. Like, wait. That name is way too cool for us.
Yeah, right. No,
more mundane.
You might have fun using it.
That's
We're
right.
Take it out. So, yeah. So .NET MAUI. So way back in the day, .NET MAUI is like the next evolution of Xamarin. So Xamarin kind of sat off by its side, even though you're using .NET to build Xamarin apps and mobile apps for it. It still kind of a little bit off to the side. So with .NET 6, .NET MAUI and Xamarin came in to be one and the same with .NET. And what's so cool about that is that .NET now is your complete unified development platform, right? And so you can be building cloud apps, web apps, even gaming apps, AI apps, all within .NET. And .NET's using the same common base libraries for everything. You have the same infrastructure, the same everything, right? So if you're going to be building a .NET app, the idea is that it can run everywhere. The same code, the same SDK. And obviously, if you're going to be building a front end, a mobile front end, you're not going to be running it on the web. But the shared code, the business logic, you're going to be able to share it between everything because it's .NET. And even more so is that you're going to be able to use your .NET skills to use C# to build your web front end or build your mobile app front end. And even better, the tooling, Visual Studio, VS Max, VS Code, even the .NET CLI, the same. You can use the tooling to build the same thing. And the great ecosystems there. NuGets, the reusable libraries, work everywhere. Awesome. And you have GitHub, and you have all the components and vendor tool libraries. They work everywhere too. And so really .NET is a complete unified development platform now. And it was kind of there before, but now it's 100% there.
Yeah.
With, .NET
I get
MAUI.
a quick question is when you're building kind of these unified applications across these different devices, do you get like, is it kind of like that same kind of responsive UX where you can run kind of the same thing on a bunch of different devices and you don't need to write bespoke code for each of them?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
But if you wanted to, you could write your custom code for the devices that you want to. And I'll get down into that. So like if you're writing something for iOS and you want it to look and act a little bit differently for iOS or for Android, you could make it do so.
Okay.
And we'll even talk maybe at the end about what Blazor Hybrid is actually bringing your web app into a mobile or desktop application. So that's super cool that you can actually take your, essentially it's kind of like Electron. If like
Oh yeah.
Teams is an Electron-based app. So like bringing a web app and actually making it run on the desktop or making
Wow.
it run on mobile too.
Just
So
seems like everything is kind of converging in some ways, or all of this is converging in some way, which is, I mean, almost the promise like we got like 20, 30 years ago, which is that write once, run everywhere
Yeah.
thing. Do you remember that? Are you old
yeah,
enough
I'm
to
almost
remember that?
hesitant to say that since, that's like Java, right? It was the promise of
Right,
Java.
well, that was
way
their
back.
promise, right? But that was kind of the goal, I guess, for that, and everybody was trying to reach that.
Yep.
But it's always been kind of it's always been beyond reach, I guess. But
Yeah.
now, these things are becoming a reality. I mean,
Yeah,
cross-platform, cross-device, single set of code. So
Yeah.
it's an exciting time to be alive, Matt.
Yep, we got it. We made it, Mark. We made it that far. Who would have thought? And so, well, today we're going to be talking about Maui. And Maui runs Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, and then iPad OS, which is really kind of iOS, and then like Android tablets. We're going to be talking about these based devices today. Now, I'm running on a Mac, so we can cross off Windows, but just for today. But if I was on a Windows machine, we could be talking about everything. And so .NET MAUI, that's the cool logo that we came up with for everything. Oh, Mark, I'm going to switch it up on you just a little bit.
Okay.
I run a .NET MAUI podcast. This is the logo for that. And I know I gave you the AKA for that.
Yeah.
And so what we do, and we talk about all goodness of .NET MAUI on that, me and James Montemagno and David Ortnell from the .NET MAUI team. And so we talk about .NET MAUI, we talk about Azure, we talk about Visual Studio, Blazor. And so it's a great place. I mean, if you're interested in learning more about .NET MAUI, definitely go and encourage your viewers to check it out.
Yeah, well, I got your URL up there, and I'll show that again throughout the show, or at least at the end there as well.
Thanks,
and absolutely, we love to cross-pollinate our podcast here. So definitely.
Awesome. So again, the .NET MAUI stands for .NET Multi-Platform App UI. And what it's cool, and the thing I want to drive home is that it's a single code base that performs great on any consumer device. So consumer devices, right? So we're aiming not at servers. We're not building web apps here. We're building client-side devices. So things like phone apps. And why they perform great is because they are native apps. They're the real thing. And so what's nice about this is that one, we talked about the unified .NET just a couple slides ago. So we have that one base class library. We have type unification. We have the CLI support. The whole .NET 6 promise is right there. But we also are building up our Android. We got our iOS. We got our Win UI apps. We're able to build for those too. And we can build for them exactly natively if we wanted to, meaning that we could get the iOS SDKs and get at them in a C# type way. And essentially, we're going to use C# to get at like UI kit on iOS. And then a cool thing is there's some productivity enhancements that came out with .NET MAUI as well, such as a single project in Visual Studio, which I'll show up in our demo, and then hot reloads, both with XAML and in the .NET code itself. So you make a change in the XAML, hit save, and the XAML is a user interface markup. All of a sudden, it shows up right on the app itself. So it really speeds up your inner development loop. And so all these new... Oh, go ahead, Mark.
So I'm just intrigued by the single project. I did a lot of mobile device stuff. This is way back in the Windows days and Windows CE days. And one of the cool things was obviously having that emulator support. Is there emulator support locally for a single project to target all these devices and then simultaneously show all these? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So what happens? It multi-targets the devices, and so you can run at least on iOS or on Mac OS. So what happens is I'm actually going to be running a Mac Catalyst native app, but then because it's a Mac app, so it just doesn't have to be a simulator. But for an iOS, I'm going to be running the iOS simulator. For Android, it's an emulator. So it actually fires up this whole Android like a virtual machine. Essentially,
is this like a containerized environment, more or less? That's just
for the Android one, you can kind of think of it as like a container. Really, it's a Android virtual machine essentially that's running for Android. For iOS, it's just a simulator. It's like another application that's running that simulates an iOS device.
Got it.
And WinUI, you don't develop WinUI apps on a Mac, which I'm currently on. You just do it from a Windows machine. And in that case, it would actually be a WinUI application that you're developing. So no simulator or emulator involved in that at all.
Cool.
But, yeah. And so the overall architecture for this, what I kind of hit on before, is you have the shared code. And in that shared code, you're going to have your user interface. You're going to have any resources needed, like images or whatever. Platform features you can get at in the shared code as well. And so I'll show this off in the demos, that in the shared code, to get at, I can actually write Android specific code within that single project shared code and have it only work for Android if I wanted to. And also you have the business logic all down in that shared code. And then for each individual platform, it's just C# and it emits an actual iOS app or a Mac OS app at the end of the day. So, I mean, we're not just doing like a web application that we're emitting and running in a web view. It's an actual iOS application itself.
Got it. I get a question from a viewer here. Oh, sorry, wrong one. And this is probably jumping ahead into the deployment thing, but can Maui apps be deployed basically outside of app stores?
Yes. Yes, they can.
go ahead. And then I have another question.
Yep. So for Windows apps, so one, you can deploy them all through app stores. You can do the app store thing. But if you needed to go without an app store through Windows, you would have to enable, I forget what mode it is on Windows, but you can just do like a click once deployment essentially and distribute it yourself through your company. Through Android, it's called sideloading, and you can distribute it that way. For iOS, it gets a little more tricky in that you still have to have a developer certificate from Apple. So it proves that you're official, but then you use something like Intune to deliver it, or App Center. So you have to have it makes it easy to have like this official way to deliver the app. So it's not going through the App Store, so Apple's not approving it in any way. So you don't have to go through their whole approval process, but it makes it easier to get it to folks by going through.
Are you voiding all warranties with Apple?
No, actually you're not. Not. So, but what happens there? I mean, so you're not having to jailbreak your phone way back in the day, like you had to. But it's just a nice way to get your app onto the device through a. Otherwise, in order to get your app onto the device, people would actually have to come to you, and you would have to get your USB out and load it from your machine.
Got it. So you get the dev cert from Apple, install that on the device, and then you can use it to basically sideload these.
Essentially, that's what's more.
I have another question. When it comes to deploying these to app stores, does .NET MAUI or the environment Visual Studio for it provide a way to kind of register and get the keys for these app stores to do commercial deployments for?
Yes.
them?
Yep.
Okay.
And so there's more or less a wizard in there that takes care of going and getting your keys, going to get your certificates, downloading them onto your machine, and then during the whole upload process, it takes care of that for you as well, doing the submitting and everything, getting it up there. For iOS, you're going to want to, you can go up there and give notes. You can also increase, when I say up there, I go into the iOS developer portal, and eventually you're going to want to give screenshots and make it pretty. That way people want to download it, but it takes care. You can get it up there through Visual Studios. So
what is the hard part? I'm sorry, I'm going to go way far afield.
Yeah, no.
What about kind of like the team development and CI/CD? Okay, I can go on my machine and go get these keys and stuff like that, but I work with a team of developers, and I want to be able to update this thing and do git push and merge and push these new binaries out and get them on my app store deployed. Is that whole workflow supported? Yeah.
So what you're going to do is on your build machine, then let's say GitHub Actions, you're going to have the certificate available there to do the building and the signing. So it wouldn't necessarily be still would have a certificate locally. Like when I'm going to be showing today, I don't even have a developer certificate installed. Actually, I probably do, but it's the free one. It's like it's not the one that you actually pay for. So Apple has one that you have to pay for.
Yeah.
But the one that you use to submit to the stores, you just put that on your build machine.
Got it.
itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not like a wizard interface, obviously, because this is more team, if you will, and a little more complex. But all these things are supported. I'm sure there's docs and instructions and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah. So once you get into the team, you're going to put in a CI/CD server out there, like GitHub Actions fully supported, and you can actually have all right, we're going to actually submit up to the store, and there's like actions for all that.
Yeah, cool
stuff as well.
Okay.
Cool. All right, and then, sorry, Mark.
No, I wasn't going to interrupt you anymore.
All right, good. Oh, that's whenever we can.
There's more coming though. I guarantee.
Okay. Yeah. So Visual Studio 2022 has a couple of new productivity features for it. Well, intelligent code editing, like the IntelliSense pops up. Super nice. It has the AI assistant IntelliCode. So when you're coding, it kind of figures out what you want to do before you do it. Kind of like the GitHub Copilot, if you're familiar with what that is. This is similar, not the same, but that's available through all Visual Studio 2022 IntelliCode. So that's there for .NET MAUI development. What's nice as well in the middle screen there, if you can see it, is that you get while you're writing your XAML or your markup language, you can see on the screen what it's going to look like, and you can also see like properties of what's going on, like what's the text color, where it actually is on the screen, like your XY coordinates and all that stuff. So it helps you build out like a picture perfect layout of what your screens are going to look like.
It's like F12 tools for your native apps.
Exactly. And then you can, when you're developing, you can just push it out wherever you need to. Even if you're on Windows, and I get this question all the time, if you're on Windows, you still can build iOS apps and debug them either on device or through a simulator, which is nice. So you're not, because to build any Apple app, you do need a Mac eventually. So you do need those Apple, the Apple magic, so to speak. But when you're developing a .NET MAUI app, you can debug on Windows. So you're not going to be tied to actually writing it on a Mac. So
if I want to do debugging or testing on live devices, does it need to be physically tethered, or can I do it over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi?
It's best to have it physically tethered. You can do it over Wi-Fi. It's the last time I tried it over Wi-Fi, it was on VS Mac, and I never tried it over on Windows. So I'm not sure if you can do it on a Windows device or not, or a Windows machine or not. But it does work on Mac Wi-Fi, but it's way better experience if you have it actually plugged in.
Makes sense.
So yeah,
it's a far cry better than it was 15 plus years ago when I was doing mobile device development.
So you plug it in, it pretty much just works. And so you're limited to within 3 feet of the machine most likely, but
okay.
And then there's VS Mac as well. So VS Mac, Mark, we were talking before the show started, is rewritten from the ground up, which is really nice. Before VS Mac it's native now. It's a real Mac OS app. Before it wasn't, but now it is. And so it's going to be faster. It's going to, it's written with the same tooling behind the scenes as Visual Studio Windows. So it's going to start sharing a lot of the same features as you have over in VS Windows, and it still has like all the hot reloads that you have over on Windows too. So Visual Studio on Mac is slowly becoming on par with Visual Studio Windows. But what's great, it was rewritten from the ground up, and so they're making progress over there, as you would know.
That's awesome. I remember very early versions of this, and it was a little clunky, but
and that's quite honestly, that's why they decided, all right, let's tear the house down and rebuild it. And
like we were talking about earlier, I mean, now .NET has evolved to a point where completely cross-platform. You can now have a solid base under which you basically can use almost the same code base to produce both. And that's, I mean, that is the promise, right? I mean, that's what we sell or how we position this, and to be using it ourselves and eat our own dog food in that respect, I think is the right thing to do. And certainly it seems like the results are showing with that. So,
And to be clear, I said it's starting to get feature parity. It's not close to feature parity just because Visual Studio Windows is a very mature product. But you know what? It's good though. I mean, I don't think anything will ever get to be Visual Studio Windows.
Look, Visual Studio's got 30 years of stuff in there, right? I think the approach is to pave the cow path rather than like, do we really need like the old object model designer from like 2005? Probably, or 2003. Probably not. And other stuff in there that's a bit long in the tooth. So
but I find it a great environment to be developing in, and so I like VS Mac. And the new way, if folks have developed in Xamarin before, you might remember that you had the solution, and then you would have a project for your Android app or for your Mac app or for your iOS app. Now with .NET MAUI, it is a single project that just multi-targets based on what you want to essentially spit out at the end of the day. So one project, multiple targets. And so that's cool. So it's just essentially you can put everything just in a single thing. It just cleans up your solution and makes it a lot easier to work with. And when we get into the demo, I'll show this off a little bit more, but you can kind of see it over on the left-hand side of the screen next to all the screenshots of the apps, how you have the dependencies folder, which shows Net 6 Android, Net 6 iOS, which is the target framework monikers, and then shows like platforms underneath that, which would be platform-specific code. And then down at the bottom is where we have our shared code, like the app.xaml and main page.xaml stuff. So one project shared across everything, which is nice.
Yeah. Question from a viewer here. Is there a way to remap the refactoring shortcuts? I find hitting 4-ish buttons for each refactor a lot. Maybe I just have to get used to it.
So in VS Mac, I would imagine so it's going to be underneath the properties, either the properties or the tools options menu. So that would probably be similar to how you have to I forget what the proper term for it is, but yeah, key mappings, you can redo those in Visual Studio. I would imagine you can do it in VS Mac as well. Like if you just type in, I assume the question is like if you type in CW, you get CW tab, you get console write line. Pretty sure you can redo it in VS Mac, although I haven't looked, but we can take a quick peek when we get into the demo. I think that's what the question is.
Okay.
So, all right. And then, we are emitting a native app for every one of these. And so that means when we're doing Android, we have access to like the Android.widgets and the Android X libraries. Same thing for iOS. We have access to the UI kit or AR kit if we're doing augmented reality. So we have access to the underlying platforms SDKs, which is cool. So even though we're still building with like .NET and the BCLs and everything like that, we are able to get over to iOS if we need to, but we don't have to build with Objective-C or Swift. We can get at it with C#, which is really neat.
Yep.
So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. And yeah, so this is just another picture of that. So you have in the gray, the bottom two rows is all the system-y namespaces, like so system.net or system.core, the stuff that we would be used to working with when you're building a .NET app with like C#. But using C#, you can also get a UI kit or map kit if you wanted to build up a specific thing for iOS. Like so if you wanted to build something for Siri, you have Siri kit available to you, so you could do it. Same thing over on Android. If you needed to build something for NFC with Android, you can do it. C# would be the C# code. Everything is bound up for you by the .NET MAUI team. Still have access though to like system.net, system.core. So it's just like this one extra footprint of the base class libraries, but just specific for Android.
These probably sit in their own namespaces. So there's like an iOS namespace and then all of those specific libraries and then Android. And okay.
Yep.
So easy to navigate and find what you're looking for with that.
Yep, exactly. And so when we're compiling, we are compiling to a native app. Like, so over on the right-hand side here, when we're compiling for Android, we're going through compiling, linking, and you're getting an APK out of it. You're getting the real thing. Over on iOS, you have to ahead of time compile. So, I mean, you're going through everything and like linking everything out. And then you get a native ARM binary coming out of it. And you're also using the latest and greatest. So for Android, I forget what it's called offhand, but what happens with the way Google now is distributing apps is that you only have to download what you need. Like if you already have it on, part of it on device, and they have an update, you only download what you need from it. We support that as well. So it's like we get all the native and latest and greatest from the two vendors, and you can do it with .NET MAUI and not have to worry about implementing it yourself either. So when you get it on device, it's just like somebody built it with Swift. The app doesn't know. You wouldn't know. Your users wouldn't know because it is the real thing. There's no difference between a .NET MAUI app and a Swift app or an Objective-C app or a Kotlin app and a .NET MAUI app built for Android. It's the real thing. Compiled, everything's native, which is neat.
Yep.
And then here's just, over 50 different controls running, built in the box, coming out from the box. You have, shapes that you can draw onto the screen. You get switches, image buttons, images. Pretty much out of the box, you can build a ton of different things. You're going to get yourself really far. And I'd be surprised if you couldn't finish anything that you wanted to with the controls that are just in the box for yourself. And you know what? You can actually go through and customize all these too if you really needed to change things up. So yeah, so everything that's built in for you is neat. And so what we're showing here is when it renders, when these controls render on the app, they're going to render in native form as well. So this waiting indicator here is going to be called in .NET MAUI an activity indicator. So my SDK, my API that I'm programming against in .NET MAUI, I'm going to actually be programming against an activity indicator. When that's rendered to the page, it's rendering an Android progress bar or an iOS UI activity indicator. So it's going to look and act native because it is, but I'm abstracted up into that activity indicator class when I'm programming against it. So I just need to remember what the .NET MAUI is calling it. And same thing over here for a slider. It's just called slider in .NET MAUI, but when it renders, it's a UI slider or a seek bar in Android. So yeah. And so that's
I have a 4-year-old Android device, so that little spinning progress bar is quite familiar looking to me.
Yep. Yeah, it just keeps on.
Just keeps going.
Keeps going. And so yeah, that's what's neat. So that's a lot of back in the Xamarin days, that was like the claim to fame originally. And like how we were talking about the run once, work anywhere, is that we abstracted that UI, that user interface, up into the common Xamarin SDK. And then we have that going here as well, where you have that abstracted up. There's a whole lot more too. And this is brand new though in .NET MAUI, and we call it the multi-platform app UI. Multi-platform means, well, desktop is part of that, and now you can actually launch separate windows with .NET MAUI. And so that's actually a big deal. So you don't actually have to have tabs or whatnot. You can have brand new windows in a MAUI app, and each window has its own lifecycle events going on too. So they can be more or less kind of separate apps running on, or at least catching on the second, or with their own life cycles too. And it's fairly easy to launch them, where you're just declaring a new window, sending it a page, So the page being what actually gets displayed and just telling the overall application, saying open it, and away you go. So Windows is called Windows for a reason, because you're going to probably need more than one, and it works. And same thing, you can do it over on Mac OS too if you
So
need it.
do these things these things individually have their own message pump or event handlers, I guess, independent of each other and independent of the process? And so does you have like one core process that spawns these new windows, and then they kind of can live on their own, and
Yeah.
and then an underlying host process underneath it? Is that kind of how this is built?
Right. Yeah. So there's going to be one. We'll show it in the demo. I'll show you where this would get spawned from. Yeah. And yeah, there's going to be one underneath that kind of runs it all.
Got it.
So, and what's nice here is you can see over this looks what it would look like on Mac. But if you're running it on iPad OS, it would you have the iPad and it would start like a new tab over on the side for you. So it respects the operating system's idioms as well when you would open up that window. So which is nice. And so getting beyond just that user interface, what we can do is we can get at things that are like common across the platforms, like a clipboard or the file system or like the device sensors. And we have like an abstraction for that as well to get at. And so we just have one API up in .NET MAUI, but like right here in these screenshots showing how to open up an app action on various different platforms. And it's just app actions that set async and then passing in the app action. And it looks and it works like you would expect each one of them on each native platform would. So app actions are common across all the platforms. And then there's an app actions API within MAUI that makes it work across all the platforms as you think it would. So which is nice. And the same thing for like the clipboard or notifications or anything like that. So anything that would be shared across the platforms, there is an API within MAUI that you can handle it with. So let's get into a demo really quick. And so what we'll do is go off and show how to run a .NET MAUI app, how to build one. I have one pretty much built already, but just kind of show off what the single project is and everything like that. And then we'll add some, because this is the Cosmos DB TV show, some Cosmos to it.
I know we haven't talked about Cosmos at all, even though this is the. Hey, folks, you gotta expand your horizons. So
that's right.
Take Cosmos, and yes, you can use it to build these types of apps. And Matt's going to show us here.
Yep, that's exactly it. And so here's the app running. And so this is our classic app that we've been using in workshops and demos all along, and it's a monkey finder. And so what it's doing here is that it's going out and grabbing monkeys from a JSON file that we just have hosted actually up in GitHub, and then displaying them. And it goes out, then we can see their details. And if I click show on map, it actually launches the native operating system's maps app. And with iOS, it's a little bit difficult for me because iOS is a pain, the simulator, to scroll out. But if I did, you'd see we are probably in Africa somewhere. And I lost where that thing was. That's because iOS is iOS. But I'm in my app, and you can see I have Monkey Finder up here, and I can go back. And it works just like you would expect it would. And I can hit Find Closest. You can see these all have locations. I hit Find Closest, and it tells me which monkey is the closest to me, which is Mooch, Monkey Mooch. His name is Mooch, and he's in Seattle. And so this is the basic app that we're using. And where am I? All right, I can show right here. This is the data that we're loading up. So the baboon is located in Africa, the details, where the image is coming from, and then the lat long. So nothing too crazy going on. It's just JSON that we have out there. So let's take a look at building it though. Right here is the single project that I was talking about. So we have Monkey Finder as a solution, and then we have the Monkey Finder project. And then underneath that, you can see I have my dependencies. I have a Net 6 Android, iOS, and then a Mac Catalyst. I don't have Windows because I cannot build a Windows app on Mac. And so if I look at my project file here, so you can see my target frameworks being Net 6, Android, Mac Catalyst. And I'm just saying, well, if I'm on Windows then, is OS platform Windows, then I would include Windows as well. So since I'm not on Windows, you're not going to see it. Oh, how do we like that? And I brought it back over.
So even if you were running Windows on a VM, you still couldn't do it, huh?
What?
Even
No, I could do it on a VM. In fact, I know I could. I don't know. Let's see. Is platform Windows and MS Build runtime equals full? Yeah, I could run it.
Okay.
So as long as my MS Build thinks I'm on Windows and I have the full MS Build runtime, I can run a WinUI app.
Okay.
All right. All right. So then have the dependencies, and then underneath each dependency, I can see which NuGets I have added to it. But most of the time, I'm going to just leave what's underneath here, leave that alone, not worry about that too much. However, what's underneath platforms is interesting to me because this is where I have my app-specific code. So if I look underneath app delegate, this is the app delegate that's running. This is an iOS app delegate. You can see here I'm using Foundation, which is a Apple thing. And then I'm saying, all right, right here, it's a MAUI UI application delegate. So we're overriding the regular UI application development, which is delegate. That's a lot of iOS-y things, but what I'm trying to get at right here is MAUI program, create MAUI app, or create a MAUI app. And the same thing over on Android. If I go into the main activity, main application, same deal. Create MAUI app. So all three of these things that are, same thing over on Catalyst, would be, these are the applications that get fired up, but they all start calling in to create MAUI app. So these are
basically the entry point of your app, basically. For
exactly.
All of them. Okay.
Exactly. All right. So then let's go down to MAUI program. And so here's create MAUI app. Now this is where things actually get super interesting because this wasn't available back into the Xamarin Forms days, in that we have the app builder pattern available to us. And what's nice about that is that we can start doing things like just do configure fonts or adding a bunch of services to it, like adding just a bunch of singletons to things. And so we can do dependency injection. And that was not there. This is all built in to the .NET MAUI, essentially middleware that we have going on now. And so that's really neat. We didn't have that before. And yeah, actually, I'm super excited about this because, as we'll see in a second, we'll be able to just swap out our Monkey service, which is our data service for when we build the Cosmos one, and it just works. And so we don't have to introduce a third-party dependency injection, or we can get our fonts automatically. It just works, which is nice. And so yeah, this is brand new, all part of .NET MAUI. Another part that's new is if we go into the images, and we can see we have this .NET Bot SVG. What's happening here is that if you drop anything into the images folder, or like the app icon or the splash screen folder, SVGs, they're image or vector graphics.
Yep.
MAUI, the runtime, will take care of resizing it for you for the particular platform that you're deploying for. So like for iOS, you have like your screen resolutions are different. And so before you have to have like an image that would work on one screen resolution, and you have to do 2x for a different screen resolution depending on which phone. By putting in this SVG file, Maui takes care of creating all of that stuff for you, which is nice. You just have to have a pop in SVG, just works, which is nice as well. So let's actually start looking at some code. All right, so this loads up. This does my create Maui app. Uses the app class right here saying use Maui app, passing in app. Let's take a peek at that. This is all just startup things. It says my main page is a new app shell. What's an app shell? An app shell is like an opinionated way to create an app. And so what it'll give me is a way to like create tabs or create a slide out menu, and it does a lot of the plumbing for me. And so all I'm doing here is saying my main shell content is just going to be something called a main page. And I'm also setting up a bunch of colors here as well, like background colors for a tab bar, stuff like that. But yeah, so I'm just saying, all right, my main page is going to be my, this is all XAML, is going to be the only thing that's displayed. And now finally, we'll look at what the main page looks like. And so this is a bunch of XAML, and things are arranged in, we can do things like grids, or we can do vertical layouts or horizontal layouts or absolute layouts where we say exactly where we want things to go. But a grid's really easy to understand. It's just a 2x2 spacing. And yeah, so we say grid collection view is like a list of things to put things in. And let's actually run it and change some things so we can see what happens. Images where we grab it out of, and then we have our buttons down here. So if I run this again, actually I'm going to change where I'm running it to my Mac so we can actually see a different runtime on it. And you'll see here I'm using binding get monkeys command, or binding is not busy. That's because I'm using the MVVM pattern as well. And so way back here in Maui program, I'm saying, all right, add a singleton for monkey's view model and add a singleton for main page. So when the main page loads up, it's getting that monkey's view model passed into it, into the constructor, and I'm setting that as the binding context. And so that means the properties in monkey view model, things like, well, actually it's going to be like the monkey and whatever the monkey has on its like name, location, details, and so on, are all available for me to bind to. So I can bind to, say, the image, or bind to the name. It's things like that. So it's super easy, like over here, the name and the location. So it's easy for me to actually go in and get the data to look at just by all declarative MVVM and data binding. So it's similar to like if you're building an Angular app, if you're used to doing the data binding that way.
Yep.
So I think we are up and running. Here we are. All right. So this now is a Mac Catalyst application running. And so if I hit get monkeys, I'm going to set a breakpoint though in my services. Monkey service. Let's do right here, right after I call the get async where the monkey JSON lives. And you can see the service, step on through, really is, says it's 200 okay, and inside the body would just be my my HTML for it, or the JSON for it, I'm sorry.
Yep.
And then I read from the content and my monkey list is fully populated, and then away I go. And what's nice too, as I mentioned that it has hot reloading, is let's go down to a button here. Let's see, this one says find closest. What I can just say then is font size, and you see I have full IntelliSense popping up. Font size equals, let's do large. Save it. And then you can see find closest popped up to be larger, and I didn't have to actually do a rebuild. Just works. So it kind of increases my cycle, my inner dev loop. And if I do show on map here, it launches the actual map for me. That's part of Mac OS, which is a little bit easier for me to deal with. You can see the little red dot right there in Tanzania. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And one other thing I'll show off real quick is it totally respects like if we were doing themes, let's go to dark mode overall. I'll jump into here. Just dark mode works. Stuff like that. I would have to rebuild to get this to work, but yeah. So things are cool like that as well. All right. Finally, 45 minutes in, Mark, and we're going to finally start talking about some Cosmos. How about that?
I like to keep them hanging on.
Yeah, finally.
The payoff is coming, folks.
Yep, here we go. Here we go. All right. So the best thing is, as I said it over and over and over again, is that this is just .NET. And so if you've used the Cosmos .NET SDK at all, you're going to find this to be super, super familiar. There's really nothing to it. And what to do it is just you add the NuGet package, which I've already have installed here, the Microsoft.Azure.Cosmos package, add it in. And then what it's going to do is going to put that package then into all of my dependencies. I'm going to put it in like the Mac Catalyst and then the iOS and so on. So it takes care of all that for me. And then I can just go ahead and start creating a new service for it. So instead of using Monkey service, which calls out to that JSON, I'll create a Cosmos service for it. I'll make this a little bit smaller. I need a service. Like that. Monkey Finder. All right. All right. So there we go. So we just have the two, not doing anything really special quite yet. But what I'm going to do here, Mark, is that you're going to probably cut me off live. Is I'm going to do this. Uh-oh. Never, ever, ever, ever do this. But Jay had asked me to put a blog post together after the show. I'm going to do that too. And I'm going to show you how to actually write an app that doesn't rely on your connection string inside the app itself. But for a quick show purpose, we're going to do that.
I think that's always the question when you're building apps that get shipped to end customers. And what we tell folks is, don't embed those in your app, because if someone can decompile it, the gig is up, so to speak, in there. However, I will point out this. We do support using Azure AD or AD Identity for people to log in. So if you were, say, building like an enterprise application and you were hosting that and connecting to Azure, you could basically use Azure or the Azure AD, create the groups, create the RBAC, all that stuff. And then customers could authenticate. I'm guessing this has support for the authentication in AD within there. And then they could authenticate that way. And then there is no, basically the token for the user returned from Azure AD is essentially your key in there. So you can avoid basically shipping your keys in your app that way. So, but for the purposes here, you would want to do, in a real world, create a service, if you will, as an endpoint that then is using Cosmos as the store.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so you
So
could implement this the same way. Instead of you using a REST call to your GitHub to that GitHub repo to pull this JSON down, you could do basically expose a REST endpoint that wraps essentially Cosmos middleware service that's doing the same exact thing.
yeah, so that's a good point, Mark. And so what I like about the Cosmos middleware, and tell me if I'm wrong here, is Cosmos itself really is a super, super great HTTP server with a nice database behind it, right? So when I communicate to it from my SDK, I'm going over HTTP with it. Am I
Yeah,
right?
I mean everything is REST in our world,
Yeah.
right? So, and in fact, if you look at the calls, you could use Fiddler and actually inspect the calls we're making in there, or you could look at our REST API. But essentially, when you're going to a document, it's a path to a resource. That's that document that sits in our data store, right? And that's basically what our API or our SDK is doing, is wrapping those REST calls. It does a lot of other stuff, obviously, as well, but that's functionally what's happening.
Cool. And there's like a traffic manager that sits in front of Cosmos then, right? Or
So we
of
have
the
a gateway, a front end
a gateway?
gateway that you can communicate to. However, we do have this mode called direct mode, which is basically over TCP.
Okay.
And the way that works is when you first authenticate, the SDK will talk to the gateway initially, and then it will say, okay, what regions is this account got configured? What partitions, physical partitions, is this person's data sitting on? And then when you essentially make your calls to get your data, the SDK knows what physical partition that data sits on, and then communicates directly over TCP to go get it. So that avoids, that's why we call it direct mode, because you are directly connecting to
Nice.
our backend partitions to grab your data.
And that's what I like about using the SDK from device rather than going like to a function or something that uses the SDK because it's fast. Or if I'm worldwide with my device or my Maui app and using the SDK will make it work faster because it'll go directly to my closest region. Would that be correct?
It will. You've got to tell the SDK what region it will. If you don't tell it, it will always connect to the primary. So you
Okay.
have to tell it which region to connect
I
to.
see. Okay.
And
Okay.
in a Azure services world, when you do deployments, say into different regions, as part of that, you would have some config value. It says this is going to say West US, this one's going to East US, this one's going to North Europe, and so on and so on. So that local instance of your app or service, geographically distributed service, knows which region it's living within. So it knows which instance of Cosmos to talk to.
Gotcha. All right.
Within a client connected world, like you could use something like Traffic Manager has a way to be able to do like performance-based routing, right? So it'll essentially, I think it uses some JavaScript that you can deploy within your app, and then it says, okay, this is the fastest response time is this region, so this is the one you should talk to. I don't know if there's a way to leverage something like that within a client app instance, possibly. If you had a way to be able to pull that out and then inject that or suck that into your app so that it knows which instance to talk to, that would work, or some other means to do that. I think the key is, and when I'm kind of scratching my head on, like, I'm wondering if using like Azure AD B2C and using groups within there, you could do something like this where you had a client, a consumer app that had used Azure B2C for authentication, and then could use the token from that user, that service principal that's logging into your app to essentially connect to just their data within Cosmos, because you could use the RBAC within.
And actually, I wrote a blog post on that as well. So
you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the blog post I'll write for Jay, I'll link to that blog post. So, but I like using the Cosmos SDK. I think it's really nice and easy to understand.
Just a question: are there different considerations for accessing, just on the topic, for mobile app versus a Windows desktop app? Matt, is there a difference?
The biggest consideration that you have to take into account of is sometimes you won't be connected to the internet on a mobile app. And what we can do here, where is it? So what you would want to do is I view solution. It went away, or is it over here? Command Shift E. So what you would want, and I'm not sure where it went. View. Remember what I said about loving Visual Studio Mac? Did it get it? Where did it go? I don't know. So what it does though is I can actually say, let's see, network. What I can do is I can check my network whether I'm connected or not.
Ah, okay.
And if I'm not connected, what I would do is just not get it. And ideally, I would go ahead and cache it. So,
Yeah, I mean, this is true, and I'm bringing up flashbacks from my old mobile device days. Is you have to assume no connectivity for your application, and then of course write code that is obviously going to check, and then once it checks, it needs to handshake and sync with the service where it is it's both going to read and write data in there, and that could be a whole host of things in there within that. Yep. So makes sense.
There we go. Where is it? Yeah, right here. So I'm checking network access to see if I even want to bother. All right. So back to, I'm not going to close this because I'll never find it. There we go. Here. So this is just normal Cosmos-y stuff. I knew up the client. I'm getting the database reference, getting the container reference, making sure I specify my partition key. And then what I like about the .NET SDK is I don't have to pass in a SQL query. I can just do my get link queryable. And then I could do things like where on it. Don't necessarily need to do that. But yeah, so here I'm just returning everything I have in there.
Yep.
And then just going through and grabbing everything out from the feed and putting it into my return list. So let's go back to the Maui program. And then instead of that, I will do builder.services.add singleton. Service. And assuming I didn't make any typos, we should be grabbing from Cosmos. And that's really, it's just .NET, right? I mean, this really is the same thing you would write for anything. You probably would write it so it's more reusable than what I did here, but yeah, it's just .NET, which is great.
Yeah, this is cool. I mean, there are things from a Cosmos perspective I would do, or that we tell customers to do. Like we have this notion of this thing called a session token, which governs essentially consistency, which is actually not the consistency you think of. It's basically consistency of data that's replicated. But one of the nice things is we have this thing that we call session consistency, which is essentially a client-based consistency, and it uses a token. And the way it works is you write data to the service or to Cosmos, and then we return a token for that data you wrote. And what's nice about that is if you flow that token all the way down to your end client, so your mobile device in this case, and then issue a read and pass that token with it, we will make sure that you read your own data essentially in there. So you will not get a dirty read on your own rights within there, because Cosmos, from a storage perspective, has a quorum of these 4 replicas, and the reads can happen on any of those 4 in there. And it's possible you could read from a replica that has not yet gotten the right. But if you pass the session token, the way it works is the read will check and say, hey, does this token match what I have in that replica? And if it doesn't, it'll go to another replica where it will get that data, making sure that you don't get a dirty read, essentially. So
That's cool.
The guarantee is that you read your own writes. And pretty much 9 times out of 10, that's exactly what people need, is to be able to read their own writes for their application. So we have mechanisms like that where if I was a mobile device developer, let's say I was building like an e-commerce app and I was adding stuff to my cart, using that, I would want to flow the session token back and forth to make sure that I'm seeing the data in my own cart, and that if I add something in there, when I do a read on it, I can get it back. So
nice.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, and so I know we're running short on time, and so what I will put in that blog post, which I've been teasing, is really how we're going to do a like, and then I'll show on the like how to put a session token into that too. But for this like, I'll show you how to hook this up then using MVVM into the details page, and that way we can go through, click on the details page, and not only show on map, but give it a like and then update that.
You know what? I really appreciate you doing that. I don't know if it's still sitting on our docs. The last time we had something on there was an old Xamarin sample that I believe was from like the 1850s or something like that. Like it's really old, from like Victorian days. I'm just joking, but it is totally out of date. So having something new and fresh is, frankly, I really genuinely appreciate that.
Yeah, I think we should get. I mean, just from our side of things too, we want people to have the latest and greatest guidance. And
wow, and this is Xamarin, or I mean now .NET MAUI. This has evolved so much over just a very short period of time. This is just remarkable. And I really do appreciate you showing us everything here. I wanted to also highlight, you mentioned this thing about the Maui Cloud Challenge. You want to talk about that for a moment?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we have going on right now what's called the .NET MAUI Cloud Skills Challenge. And so we have 7 .NET MAUI apps or cloud apps built. Let me open this up so we can, let's see, what is it? MAUI Cloud Challenge. Bring me up the Survey Monkey, which I didn't want to see. But anyways, you go through here and you register for it. And by registering for it and finishing it, what you'll do is be able to be eligible for a sticker pack when you finish the 7 Learn modules that teach you from A all the way through Z of .NET MAUI. And so Microsoft Learn modules are the brand new, or not brand new, but the .NET MAUI ones let's see, let's do browse. .NET MAUI. And here they all are. So you can go through, just start your cross-platform app. And by the end, you're going to be consuming REST services. We're actually deploy something up into Azure with it. And you're going to learn everything along the way, including how to build
these are great. I worked on our Cosmos certification last year, and part of that was creating all of this new learning content, and it's all lab-based in there. And so we've got a whole slew, I think it's like 30 plus modules in there now. It's a lot, right? And we basically rewrote all of our learning content that we had to help support certification, and we want to make sure people had enough knowledge to be able to do it. And I love the format of this because you don't even need an Azure subscription to run these things in most cases if you're talking to Azure there. And it just walks you through these things, and you get the knowledge checks, you get all the other kind of goodies around that as well. And you get the badges as well. So if you
get the badges
on there. Hey, question here from viewer. I'm thinking we would always want to authenticate via Azure AD when reading writing to Cosmos. Yes, that is true. You would want. So the technique of having a mobile app read and write using Cosmos NuGet secure. Yes, that would be secure. The question I have is, I know this works in the B2B, Azure AD B2B scenario. What I don't know is, does that work for Azure B2C? That is a question that I don't know the answer to. But if someone wants to go and try that out, I would be definitely curious. Oh yeah, and a follow-up on this. This is the pattern, Siegfried, is. And the way I would do this too is I would stand up a very simple Azure function, HTTP Azure function as a REST endpoint, and then just call that. And then you've got essentially service-side connectivity to Cosmos where you're not sharing secrets. You could do whatever you want auth-wise to your HTTP function in there, right? So that could include whatever you want into there. But yes, that is the pattern I would use here, and using something like Azure Functions, where you could quickly and easily expose a REST endpoint that you're calling and communicating with. That is absolutely the right pattern for that. So yeah, so thank you, Siegfried, for calling that out. So yeah, we're getting a little short on time. Any last words there?
No. Feel free over here, CodeMail Matt. If y'all have any questions at all, feel free to reach out. Or
and you know what? I'm going to put up your podcast again as well for folks.
Yeah.
So,
or feel free to reach out to me at that Soucoup at Microsoft.com if y'all ever want to talk about .NET MAUI at all.
Cool. I think Matt's going to be working on a new inbox rule for that. So, no, just kidding. So, right on, Matt. Hey, it was fantastic having you on the show this week. This is really a really fascinating topic, and I'm glad you're able to come on. I'm really excited that we'll have new content for essentially this next generation of building these apps. Kind of the evolution of the mobile from Xamarin and the desktop. I'm really excited about what comes with the integration with the Blazor stuff coming down the road as well. So
we didn't even talk about that.
From that team to come on.
We should. We should get Dan Roth on.
There you go. Yeah. So, all right. Well, hey, folks, thanks for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed the show. Just a quick reminder, come join us in our monthly Azure user group meetups, or Cosmos DB user group meetups. New topics every month. So come and check us out there. What episode? We got episode 58. So come check out. We've got 57 other episodes available online at aka.ms/Cosmos DB Live TV. That's it for us this week. Matt, thank you once again. I really appreciate you coming on. This was really good. Love seeing the work you guys are doing.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I had a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll see you next week.